Welcome back, deep divers. Today we're diving into the world of animal social lives.
Ooh, sounds fascinating.
It is, but we're adding a twist.
Oh,
Robots.
robots. Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
So scientists are designing these robots that look and act like real animals.
Ah, biomimetic robots.
Exactly. They're using them to, study how animals interact.
Interesting. So why robot? I mean, we've been observing animals in the wild forever.
Right. But with robots, scientists have, more control.
I see. It's about precision, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. They can manipulate specific things in the environment.
And repeat experiments exactly the same way each time.
Yes. It's like having a research assistant who never gets tired or messes up.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
So it's all about isolating cause and effect, getting to the heart of how these social interactions really work.
Exactly. And honestly, the things they're discovering are amazing.
I bet. What kind of animals are we talking about here?
Well, we've got a whole lineup today.
Yeah.
Everything from honeybees
Honeybees. Okay, those are social creatures for sure.
to pigeons, termites, and even robotic fish designed to, you'll have to wait and see.
Sounds like we've got a lot to cover. Let's dive in. Where do you want to start?
Let's start with the honeybees. I know scientists created a robo-bee to try to decode their waggle dance.
Ah, yes, the waggle dance. It's like their secret language telling each other where to find food.
Right. But it's so complex, like a whole sequence of movements and vibrations.
It's amazing they can understand it all.
I know. So how does this robo-bee actually work?
Well, the first version was kind of a simplified bee shape. It had a wing that scientists could control to mimic the waggle dance.
So they were basically puppeteering this robo-bee to do the dance.
Pretty much. They even put it on a track so it could move in a straight line, like a real bee would on the honeycomb.
That's clever. So what happened? Did the real bees follow robo-bee's lead?
Sometimes they would fly straight to the food source, even if they'd never been there before.
So it worked.
Yeah. But other times they totally ignored it or took days to respond.
Huh. Inconsistent results.
It was. But it got the scientists thinking,
Oh,
well, if Rapplebee was doing the dance right, why weren't the bees always following?
good point.
It suggests there's more to it than just the dance moves themselves.
Like what?
Maybe things like the individual bees' experience, or even their personality.
So some bees are just more skeptical of directions from a stranger.
Maybe. So now they're focusing on those individual differences. They upgraded RoboBee to be more realistic.
In what way?
They gave it more freedom of movement, and the ability to vibrate.
Oh, cool. Like a real bee.
Yeah. And they're tracking individual bees to see how things like their age or their experience foraging affect how they respond.
Wow. So much we still don't know, even about something like a bee's dance.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's move on from bees to birds. You mentioned something about robotic falcons and pigeons.
Ah, yes. This one's all about how pigeon flocks respond to predator attacks.
I'm picturing like a robotic bird of prey swooping down on a flock of unsuspecting pigeons.
Haha, it's not too far off. There's this classic theory, the selfish herd hypothesis.
Which says?
It says each bird basically tries to get to the center of the flock, to use their buddies as shields.
Safety in numbers.
Exactly. But how do you test that without, actually releasing falcons into a flock?
That would be chaotic.
Right. And that's where the robotic falcon comes in. They design one that could be flown in a very specific pattern.
Controlled chaos.
Exactly. And they put tiny GPS trackers on the pigeons so they could track their every move.
That's pretty high tech. And what do they find?
Well, surprisingly, the pigeons didn't all just make a beeline for the center.
Whoa. What do?
They synchronized their movements, like a perfectly choreographed dance almost.
Wow. Really?
Yeah, dodging and weaving together, making it much harder for the predator to target any single bird.
So much for the selfish herd, huh?
It really challenges that idea. It seems like there's a lot more cooperation going on than we thought.
Fascinating. Makes you wonder how much we've misinterpreted about animal behavior
Yeah.
simply because we haven't had the right tools to observe them.
It's a good point. Technology is really changing the game.
All right, I'm hooked. What other animal encounters with robots do we have in store?
Well, let's dive into the aquatic world next. Researchers have been using a robofish to study leadership in guppy schools.
Robofish. Is this like a tiny robotic Jaws?
Haha, not quite. It's more like a very realistic guppy replica.
Okay, less scary then. What were they trying to figure out?
They wanted to know what determines leadership in a fish school. Is it just size? experience,
Yeah.
or something else?
I guess size. Bigger fish, bigger boss, right?
That's what a lot of people think. And the robofish did show that bigger individuals were more likely to be followed.
So size does matter.
It does seem to play a role. But there's a twist. They programmed some of the robofish to be what they called socially competent.
Socially competent fish. What does that even mean?
Basically, these robofish were programmed to, keep a comfortable distance from the other fish, respect their personal space.
Fish etiquette.
Right. And guess what?
What?
Those polite robofish ended up being much more effective leaders.
Really?
Yeah. They attracted larger, more cohesive groups of followers.
So it's not just about being the biggest and strongest.
It seems like even in the underwater world, being a considerate leader can make a big difference.
That's awesome. Who knew fish could teach us about leadership?
There's always something new to learn from the animal kingdom.
All right, I'm ready for more. What else have you got?
Well, now we're going to switch gears a bit.
Oh.
From robots that interact with animals to robots that simulate their behavior.
Oh.
Get ready to enter the world of robotic termites.
Robotic termites. Okay, I'm officially intrigued. What's the story there?
So scientists were trying to understand how termites build those incredibly complex mounds, specifically the entrance chimneys.
I've always been fascinated by those mounds. How do they make them so intricate?
It's amazing, right? Well, researchers were especially interested in what cues the termites use to decide where to put the soil they dig up.
Dirt placement. That sounds a little less exciting than robotic falcons, to be honest.
Yeah, fair enough. But think about it. That simple act of deciding where to drop a speck of dirt is what ultimately creates the whole structure.
That's true.
So they suspected that termites might be using humidity as a guide. The inside of the mound is humid, the outside is drier.
I see.
So they figured maybe the termites would drop their soil where those two humidity levels meet, kind of marking the boundary of their home.
Interesting theory. But how do you test that with, like, a zillion tiny termites?
You guessed it, robots.
Of course. Were they like tiny little robot termites with like miniature shovels?
Not quite that elaborate. These were more like little carts that could pick up and drop blocks.
It's much simpler.
Exactly. And they programmed them with a basic rule. Carry blocks when humidity is high, drop them when it's low.
Elegant.
And they let them loose in a controlled environment. And they built a 2D version of a termite mound entrance, complete with a chimney-like structure.
No way. That's incredible.
It is. And they even adapted to changes in wind, just like real termites.
So, case closed. Termites use humidity to build their mounds.
Well, it doesn't definitively prove that's the only thing they use.
Okay.
But it shows that humidity is enough to create those complex structures.
Mind-blowing. Okay, before we move on, you mentioned something earlier about a terror fish. I have to know more.
Yes. That one is all about using robots not just to understand animals, but to potentially control them.
Control. Okay, this sounds a little ominous.
Well, the target in this case is the mosquito fish.
Mosquito fish. What's so bad about them?
They're a huge invasive species problem.
Ah, I see. So are we talking about like releasing robot assassins to wipe them out?
Not assassins, exactly, but something designed to strike fear into their little fishy hearts.
I'm on the edge of my seat.
The researchers created a robotic replica of a largemouth bass, a natural predator of mosquito fish.
Ooh, psychological warfare. Clever.
Right. But the results were even more surprising than they expected. We'll dive into all that after a short break.
Stay tuned. All right, we're back and ready to hear more about this robotic terror fish.
Well, you'd think the mosquito fish would just, run and hide whenever they saw the robot.
Yeah. Seems like the sensible thing to do when you see a predator, robotic or not.
Exactly. But that's not what happened. They found something much more interesting. Even short exposures to the robot led to, lasting changes in the mosquito fish.
Really? Like they became more timid or something?
It was more than that. The fish actually started showing signs of, chronic stress.
Wait, seriously? Just from seeing this robot?
Yeah. They lost weight, they became less active, even their foraging behavior changed.
Wow, that's pretty intense. I mean, it was just a robot, right?
Right. They were never actually in danger, but their bodies were reacting as if they were under constant threat.
So it's like they were living in a perpetual state of, fight or flight.
Exactly. And this chronic stress actually had a kind of domino effect on the whole ecosystem.
How so?
Well, because the mosquito fish were so stressed out, they weren't hunting as effectively, they weren't reproducing as much.
I see.
And that actually gave the native species, the ones the mosquito fish had been, out-competing, a chance to recover.
So the robotic base wasn't killing the mosquito fish directly,
Oh.
but it was like tilting the balance of power back in favor of the native species.
Exactly. It's a more subtle way of managing invasive species.
This is incredible, but I have to say it also makes me think about, like, the ethical side of all this.
It's definitely something to consider. Using robots to, manipulate animal behavior on a large scale.
Yeah, it feels like we're entering some uncharted territory here.
Yeah. It's a conversation we need to have. As this technology advances, we need to be asking the tough questions.
Absolutely. Like, what are the potential downsides? Could there be unintended consequences we haven't even thought of yet?
Exactly. And how do we make sure we're not harming individual animals, even if it's for a greater good like conservation?
It's a tough balance to strike.
It is. But it's important to have these discussions now while the field is still relatively new.
Right. We need to figure out the ethical guidelines before we, go too far down this road.
Exactly. We need scientists, ethicists, policymakers, everyone to be part of this conversation.
So it's not just about the can we?
No.
It's also about the should we.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm feeling a bit more optimistic now. It sounds like we're at least starting to ask the right questions.
That's a good start.
Right.
Now, shifting gears a bit, I want to talk about another exciting area where biomimetic robots are making a difference.
Oh, I'm all ears.
Conservation research.
Okay, tell me more.
One of the biggest challenges in conservation is just getting data,
Yeah, I can imagine. It's not like you can just, send out a survey to a bunch of animals and ask them how they're doing.
Exactly. It's hard to track and observe animals in the wild, especially if they're, rare or live in hard-to-reach places.
Makes sense.
And that's where biomimetic robots come in.
Okay, how so?
Well, imagine a robot that can blend in perfectly with its surroundings.
Like an undercover agent.
Exactly. It can get close to the animals without disturbing them and collect all sorts of data.
Wow, what kind of data?
Oh, all sorts. Their movements, their sounds, even things like their heart rate and body temperature.
So we can learn so much more at how they actually live their lives.
Exactly. And that data is, invaluable for conservation efforts. We can use it to identify critical habitats, to see how human activity is impacting them.
So robots, which we usually think of as, cold and mechanical, are actually helping us connect with and understand nature better.
It's pretty amazing. It's like they're opening a window into a world we wouldn't be able to see otherwise.
I love that. Okay, before we wrap up the segment, I have one more question.
Sure.
We've talked about robots mimicking behavior, robots triggering responses, and robots observing.
Right.
But what about communication? Could we actually have robots that, talk to animals?
That's a fascinating question, and it's something that researchers are starting to explore. They're developing robots that can produce the same sounds and signals that animals use to communicate.
So, robots that can chirp like a bird or sing like a whale?
Exactly. And the possibilities are incredible. Imagine a robot that could, warn a herd of deer about a wildfire or guide sea turtles away from fishing nets.
It's like we could actually have a conversation with them.
In a way, yes. We could use these robots to study animal communication in more detail than ever before, learn about their social structures, maybe even influence their behavior for conservation purposes.
Wow. That's amazing, but also a little bit scary, right?
You're right. There are definitely ethical considerations. Well, what if the robot's signals disrupt the animal's natural behaviors, like their mating rituals or territorial boundaries?
I see. We don't want to help them in one way and then accidentally harm them in another.
Exactly. It's a balancing act. We need to be really careful about how we use this technology.
It's a reminder that with great power comes great responsibility, right?
Absolutely. We have to approach this field with respect for the complexity of animal life.
And make sure we're using this technology for good.
I think we're on the right track. We're asking the right questions, and we're aware of the potential risks.
That's good to hear. This whole deep dive has been incredibly eye-opening for me.
I'm glad to hear that.
I've learned so much about how animals interact with each other and how robots are, helping us to understand them in a whole new way.
It's a rapidly evolving field. There's always something new to discover.
Okay, as we wrap up, what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away from all this?
I'd say remember that the world of animal behavior is full of wonder and complexity. And with technology, we have the potential to not only understand it better, but also to help protect it.
That's a great message. Science isn't just about cold, hard facts. It's about wonder and appreciation for all living things.
Well said.
Thank you so much for joining us on this journey.
My pleasure.
And to our listeners, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep being amazed by the incredible world of animals. Until next time on The Deep Dive. Welcome back to The Deep Dive. We've been on this amazing journey exploring animal social lives and the role of biomimetic robots.
It's been fascinating, hasn't it?
Absolutely. Before the break, we were talking about the idea of robots actually communicating with animals.
Ah, yes, the next frontier.
It sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi movie.
It might seem that way, but it's closer than you think. Scientists are working on robots that can not only mimic behaviors, but also produce the same sounds, signals, even chemical cues that animals use.
Whoa. So we're talking about robots that can chirp like a bird or maybe even sing like a whale.
Exactly. Imagine the possibilities.
It's mind-blowing.
Imagine a robot that could warn a herd of deer about a wildfire.
Or guide sea turtles away from fishing nets.
Exactly. We could study animal communication in ways we never could before, learn about their social structures, maybe even influence their behavior to help with conservation.
It's like we could actually have a conversation with them.
In a way, yes. But of course, there are ethical considerations.
Right. We need to be careful about how we use this technology.
Absolutely. We don't want to accidentally cause harm while trying to help.
Exactly. Like what if we mess up their mating rituals or something?
That's a valid concern. Imagine a robot trying to lure an endangered species away from danger, but it ends up disrupting their breeding grounds.
Oops. Not good.
Not good at all. We need to proceed with caution, always thinking about the potential impact on the animals and their ecosystems.
It's about finding that balance, right?
Yes. Using technology to benefit animals without interfering too much with their natural lives.
It's a challenge for sure.
It is. But I'm optimistic. I think if we approach this field with respect for the complexity of animal life, we can use this technology responsibly.
That's reassuring. This whole deep dive has been a real eye-opener for me.
Me too. It's amazing what we're learning.
I've learned so much about how animals communicate, how they interact, and how robots are helping us unlock those secrets.
It's an exciting time to be studying animal behavior.
It is. So as we wrap things up, what's the one key takeaway you want our listeners to ponder?
I would say this. The world of animal behavior is full of wonder and complexity. And as technology keeps advancing, we have an incredible opportunity to not just understand this world better, but to help protect it.
That's beautifully said. It reminds me that science isn't just about, facts and figures.
Right.
It's about wonder, empathy, and appreciation for all living things.
I couldn't agree more.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on this incredible journey.
It's been my pleasure.
And to our listeners, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep being amazed by the incredible world of animals. We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.